Camping is supposed to be peaceful, a chance to escape the noise of the world and sit under the stars. But when the sun goes down and the forest comes alive with sounds you can't explain, that peace turns into something far darker. Imagine lying in your tent, hearing footsteps outside, voices whispering your name, or finding things at your campsite that you never brought with you. These aren't just stories, they're chilling experiences that really happened. Tonight, we'll dive into 5 creepy camping horror stories from the woods. And trust me, you may never look at camping the same way again. Story 1. It was the summer of 2016 when I went camping with 2 of my closest friends, Alex and Ryan. We had chosen a quiet spot deep in the forests of Colorado, far away from the crowded campgrounds. The plan was simple: spend 3 days in the woods, enjoy the fresh air, and disconnect from the world. The first day went by peacefully. We set up our tents, collected firewood, and spent the evening roasting marshmallows. As the fire crackled, Ryan joked about horror movies and how camping always seemed to go wrong in them. We all laughed it off, never imagining that our own trip would turn into something out of one of those stories. By the second night, the mood had changed. The woods felt heavier, quieter, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Around midnight, while we were sitting by the dying fire, we heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, crunching the dry leaves just beyond the circle of our light. At first I thought it was another camper, maybe someone lost. But when I called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" the footsteps immediately stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound itself. We scanned the tree line with our flashlights but saw nothing. The forest was pitch black, and the shadows seemed to move with every flicker of our lights. We decided to ignore it and went into our tents, but none of us could sleep. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of those same footsteps again, this time circling our tent. The crunch of leaves moved slowly around us, pausing now and then, as if whoever, or whatever it was listening. I held my breath, too scared to even whisper. Ryan whispered from the other tent, "Do you hear that?" Alex shushed him instantly. The 3 of us stayed frozen, listening. The footsteps made a full circle, then stopped right at the entrance of my tent. I could see the shadow of something tall, through the thin fabric, standing perfectly still. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might give me away. Minutes felt like hours before the shadow finally moved away. The footsteps faded into the distance, but sleep. Story 2. Back in 2019, my cousin and I decided to take a spontaneous camping trip in northern Michigan. We had both grown up around the woods, and camping had always been second nature to us. But this time, instead of staying at the usual campgrounds, we thought it would be more adventurous to explore an old abandoned site my cousin had heard about from a friend. It was a place that used to be a family campground in the 1980s, but had shut down decades ago after reports of strange incidents. We didn't know much about the details, and honestly, we didn't care. For us, it was just another cool, forgotten place to explore. When we arrived, the area felt eerie right away. The picnic tables were rotting, the old fire pits were filled with weeds, and the cabins were broken down and covered in graffiti. But the strangest thing was that the whole place looked like people had just walked away one day and never returned. Rusted lanterns still hung from poles, and we even found an old cooler half buried in the dirt. We set up our tent near the edge of the site, trying not to think too much about how creepy it all felt. As night fell, we made a small fire and cooked dinner. Everything was fine until we started hearing snapping branches from the tree line. It wasn't unusual to hear animals, but these sounded heavier, like a person walking. I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" But no one answered. The sound stopped and the forest went dead quiet. The silence made me uneasy, but my cousin shrugged it off. He said it was probably a deer. Around midnight we crawled into the tent. I was just starting to drift off when I heard it again. Footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps moving across the campground. I froze. My cousin whispered, "You hear that?" We both listened as the sound drew closer and closer until it was right outside our tent. Through the thin fabric, I could see a shape pass by. A tall figure moving slowly, like someone limping. My heart was racing as I grabbed my flashlight, but I was too afraid to unzip the tent. The footsteps circled us, then faded away into the woods. We didn't sleep much that night. At sunrise, we found something outside that sent chills through both of us. In the dirt, just a few feet from the fire pit, were boot prints. Old, worn-down boots, with soles so thin they had almost no tread left. They weren't ours. We tried to laugh it off, but that night it got worse. Around 2 a.m., we were woken by the sound of humming, a low, tuneless humming that seemed to come from all around the campground. We sat in silence, clutching our flashlights, too scared to move. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw him. A man was standing near one of the broken cabins. His figure was faint in the darkness, but I could see his head cocked to the side, watching us. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, humming that same haunting sound. We bolted. Grabbing only our phones and keys, we ran straight to the car and didn't look back. The drive out of those woods was the longest of my life. My cousin swears the man followed us, because in the rearview mirror he saw a shadow at the edge of the trees until the road curved away. To this day, I don't know who or what we saw. But that abandoned campground wasn't empty. Someone, or something, was still living there. And whatever it was, it wanted us gone. Story 3. It was the fall of 2014 when my girlfriend and I joined a small camping group in Oregon. There were 6 of us in total, 3 couples, who wanted to spend a weekend off-grid, hiking, cooking over a fire, and telling stories under the stars. We picked a remote spot near Mount Hood where the forest is so dense that once you go deep enough, it feels like the outside world doesn't exist. The first night was perfect. We made dinner, passed around hot drinks, and laughed until our stomachs hurt. The second night, though, something happened that none of us will ever forget. It started when Jason, one of the guys in our group, went to collect more firewood around 11 p.m. He had a lantern and told us he'd be back in 10 minutes. We didn't think twice about it until half an hour passed and he hadn't returned. At first, we thought he was playing a prank. Jason was the kind of guy who loved scaring people. But when we called his name into the woods, there was no answer. My girlfriend grabbed a flashlight, and a couple of us set out in the direction he'd gone. We didn't have to walk far before we found the lantern, still glowing faintly on the ground. But there was no sign of Jason, just silence. We shouted his name over and over, our voices echoing through the trees, but the forest swallowed every sound. When we got back to camp, the mood had changed completely. Everyone was on edge. Hours passed and still no sign of him. Around 2 a.m., just as we were considering packing up to drive for help, we heard footsteps. They were slow, dragging footsteps, coming straight toward the camp. We shined our flashlights into the darkness, and for a moment I swear I saw him, Jason, standing at the edge of the trees. His clothes looked the same, but something was off. His face, it was blank. His arms hung stiffly at his sides, and he didn't respond when we called his name. He just stood there, swaying slightly, before stepping backward into the shadows. We chased after him, but when our lights cut through the trees, he was gone. Completely gone. The only thing left were footprints in the dirt that led a few yards into the forest before abruptly stopping, as if he had vanished into thin air. At sunrise, we searched again. No Jason. No trace of where he could have gone. Finally, we hiked back to the trailhead and called the authorities. A search team was dispatched, and they spent days combing the woods. They never found him. Not a single piece of clothing, not a sign of struggle, nothing. What's even more disturbing is what happened a week later. My girlfriend got a message on her phone from an unknown number. It was a photo, blurry, dark, and clearly taken in the woods. But standing in the middle of that picture was Jason. His face was shadowed, but the outline of his body, his clothes, it was him. We showed it to the police, but they dismissed it as a cruel prank. They never traced where it came from. To this day, Jason has never been found. His family eventually gave up hope, but those of us who were there that night, we know what we saw. I can't explain what happened or who sent that photo, but I do know one thing. Something took Jason from those woods. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if it's still out there, waiting for the next camper to wander too far from the firelight. Story 4. In the summer of 2017, my brother and I went camping with two friends in the remote mountains of Montana. We picked a spot near a lake that was miles away from any marked trail. The view was breathtaking during the day, towering pine trees, clear water, and absolute silence. But once the sun went down, that silence turned heavy, almost suffocating. On our second night, we built a fire and sat around talking. The woods were quiet except for the crackle of burning wood and the occasional splash from the lake. Around midnight, though, we heard something moving in the brush behind us. At first, we assumed it was a deer, but the sound was wrong. Instead of the random crunch of an animal, it was rhythmic, like someone crawling slowly on all fours. We shined our flashlights, but the beam only cut through a few feet of the thick trees. That's when we heard a low, rasping sound, almost like heavy breathing. My brother whispered, "Do you hear that?" We all froze, staring into the darkness. Then we saw it. At the very edge of our firelight, a figure crawled into view. It was pale, hairless, and moving unnaturally, its limbs bending in strange, jerky motions. For a moment, I thought it was a person badly injured crawling for help. But then it stopped, lifted its head, and stared at us with eyes that reflected the firelight, like an animal's. No one moved, no one breathed. The thing just crouched there watching us. Then, without warning, it darted back into the trees with a speed I can't even describe. The sound of branches snapping echoed through the woods as it disappeared. We were terrified, but leaving at night was impossible. So we doused the fire, climbed into our tents, and sat in silence, clutching knives and flashlights. Around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of something brushing against the side of our tent, a dragging sound, like fingers trailing across the fabric. Then came a scratching, slow, deliberate scratches that moved across the entire side. My brother whispered, "It's outside." His voice was trembling. The scratching stopped, and for a few minutes we thought maybe it had left. But then came the breathing again. Heavy, wet breaths right at the entrance of the tent. I could see the shadow of something pressing against the thin material, stretching it inward as if testing it. We didn't move until dawn. When the sun finally rose, we rushed out of the tent. The ground around our campsite was covered in prints. Handprints and footprints mixed together but wrong. The hands were too large, the fingers too long, and the tracks circled the entire camp multiple times. We packed up and left within an hour. None of us spoke during the hike back. It wasn't until weeks later that I dared to mention it again. When I described what we saw, a local friend said we weren't the first to talk about something crawling in those woods. I don't know what that thing was or why it came so close to us, but I do know this. If you ever camp in the Montana backwoods and hear something crawling outside your tent, don't wait to find out what it is. Leave before it finds you. Story 5. Back in 2012, my college roommate and I went camping in the Appalachian Mountains. We had just finished finals and wanted a quiet escape before a summer job started. The spot we chose was beautiful. Deep woods, far from any towns, with a small clearing perfect for setting up camp. The first day was peaceful. We hiked, swam in a creek, and cooked over the fire. As the sun set, the forest grew quiet, and for a while we just sat back, enjoying the calm. But as the fire burned low, a sound drifted through the trees, soft whistling. At first I thought it was another group of campers, maybe someone messing around. But the longer we listened, the stranger it became. The tune didn't sound playful. It was slow, off-key, and chilling. The whistle would start, stop, then start again from a different part of the forest, as if whoever was doing it was circling us. We called out, "Hello?" but got no reply. The whistling continued, closer this time. My roommate tried to laugh it off, but I could see the fear on his face. When we finally went to bed, I lay awake, listening. Around 2 a.m., the whistling returned. This time, it was right outside our tent. A low, deliberate tune played just inches away from where we slept. My roommate whispered, "Don't move." We held our breath as the sound lingered for what felt like forever. Then, slowly, it faded into the distance. At sunrise, we searched the area. That's when we noticed something carved into a nearby tree, a crude stick figure with a wide, round mouth. The sight of it made my skin crawl. That night it happened again. The whistling began around midnight, moving from tree to tree until it was just beyond the glow of our fire. We pointed our flashlights into the darkness but saw nothing. Then, rocks started landing near the fire. Small pebbles at first, then larger stones. Something was throwing them, but we couldn't see from where. We shouted warnings, even threatened to call the police. But the forest swallowed our voices. The whistling never stopped. It grew louder, closer, until suddenly it cut off. The silence that followed was worse. That was when we heard heavy breathing just outside the tent. Slow, ragged breaths, like someone trying not to laugh. My roommate gripped a knife in one hand, his phone in the other, but neither of us dared to unzip the tent. We sat there paralyzed until dawn lit up the forest. When we stepped out, the clearing was empty, but etched into the dirt around our tent were more stick figures. Dozens of them, all facing inward, as if watching us while we slept. We left immediately. The entire hike back, we kept expecting to hear the whistle again, but the woods stayed silent. To this day, I don't know who or what was out there. But every now and then, when I hear someone casually whistling in public, my stomach knots, because it sounds just like the tune we heard in those woods. And I'll never go camping in the Appalachians again. And that wraps up tonight's stories. If you made it this far, ask yourself, would you ever go camping deep in the woods after dark? Or is it safer to just stay home and keep the lights on? These stories remind us that the forest isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it hides things we're not meant to see or hear. If you enjoyed these tales, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a night of horror. Sleep well tonight, if you can.